October 1999, New Haven, Connecticut. A father comes home after work. He sets down his keys, calls out for his daughter. Silence, not a sound, not a cry, not a laugh. The air is thick with nothingness. He hurries to his daughter's room, but the crib is empty. The toys are untouched. The only thing missing is her. Her name is Sofia Michelle Rivas, just 23 months old, barely 2. And without a moment's notice, she is gone. No call, no note, no trace. For hours, the police race to the scene. There's no sign of forced entry, no blood, no struggle. Only one thing echoing through the halls. Her mother took her. Her name is Rosa Tenorio, and she is gone. Sofia was supposed to be safe. The court had granted her father full custody. Rosa had a history of instability. She wasn't allowed to take Sofia out of state, yet she had disappeared, and the child was gone with no trace. As the days pass, weeks turn into months. The search grows cold. A warrant is issued for custodial interference, and the FBI joins the hunt. It's believed Rosa fled to Mexico, possibly to Puebla, where she had distant family. But there's a catch. Mexico doesn't easily extradite for parental kidnapping. And once they crossed that border, they disappeared into the unknown. No leads, no sightings, just a missing child and a father devastated by the unthinkable. Carlos Rivas, Sofia's father, began his own search. He printed flyers. He contacted private investigators. He spent his own money flying to Mexico, chasing after shadows. For 25 years, he didn't stop. "I never stopped believing she was alive," he once said. "I just didn't know where to find her." Before I begin, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. I'd love to know just how far this story is reaching. But for Sofia Michelle Rivas, the story was just beginning. What happens when the kidnapped child grows up? What happens when the child who vanished isn't just lost? She's living a completely different life. Imagine this, growing up not knowing your name is fake, that your birthday is nothing but an empty date with no candles, no celebrations. You've never seen a photo of yourself as a baby. The woman you called mama is the reason you vanished. That was Sofia Michelle Rivas' reality. In Puebla, Mexico, Sofia didn't know she was Sofia. She was raised under a completely different identity, one her mother had carefully constructed to shield her from her true past. To the people in her neighborhood, Sofia was just another shy, quiet child. She went to school. She helped her mother with groceries. She spoke Spanish fluently, ordinary. But behind closed doors, there was always something off. Rosa was secretive, strict. She rarely allowed Sofia to socialize with outsiders, not even allowing sleepovers or visits. It was a closed-off world. One day, Sofia asked, "Why don't we have any baby pictures?" Rosa wouldn't answer. No pictures, no family albums. No memories from before Mexico. Rosa always said, "We moved a lot. You were born in Mexico." But that wasn't true. Sofia was born in the United States, stolen when she was barely walking. And yet, the life Rosa gave her wasn't all cruel. She enrolled her in school, she fed her, she raised her, but in the twisted way that only a mother who'd stolen her child could. Sofia didn't know what she was missing. She had no idea of the life she could have had, the family she should have grown up with. She was sheltered, isolated. In some ways, Rosa's actions mirrored those of a protective mother, a woman trying to shield her daughter from the world. But Sofia wasn't just kept safe. She was kept hidden. Her entire childhood was built on a lie. The only family she had known was Rosa, who with every passing year seemed to get more distant, more guarded. Sofia grew up with questions that nobody had answers for. Why couldn't she go to sleepovers? Why was she always told to stay away from strangers? Why was there no mention of her past, of where she came from before Mexico? One night as they sat at the dinner table, Sofia broke the silence. "Why don't we have any baby pictures?" she asked again, her voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and fear. Rosa's face tightened. Her eyes avoided Sofia's gaze. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Rosa didn't answer. Years passed. The questions only grew. But as Sofia grew older, Her curiosity turned into a quiet understanding. She wasn't like the other kids. She wasn't like anyone around her. She didn't look like her neighbors. She didn't have the same memories, the same sense of belonging. Her past was shrouded in secrecy, and no one at all could explain why. Yet despite everything, Sofia carried on. She went to school, made friends, worked hard, but she always felt off, like she was living someone else's life. A life she didn't choose, a life she didn't understand. There was a piece missing, a piece that nobody, not even Rosa, could ever fill. The pieces of Sofia's identity were scattered, locked away in the past, buried by lies and buried by the woman who raised her. But deep down, Sofia knew that the truth was waiting for her somewhere, somewhere far away, hidden behind the borders of Mexico and the shadows of her childhood. There was a truth that could shatter the very foundation of her world. What if Sofia's true identity wasn't lost? What if it was just waiting to be found? The truth, like a silent whisper, was beginning to claw its way out. And when it did, everything would change. For Sofia, for her real family, and for the woman who thought she could keep the truth buried forever. What would happen when Sofia finally discovered the truth about herself? What would happen when she found out that everything she knew was a lie? And how would she react when the woman she trusted, her mother, was the one responsible for her life being stolen? Stay with us as we follow Sofia's journey to uncover her true identity and the emotional roller coaster that follows as she learns what was hidden from her for so long. Before we continue with this heart-wrenching journey, I want to take a moment to thank all of my incredible subscribers. Your support keeps this channel growing, and I couldn't do this without you. If you're enjoying this story and can feel the tension building, hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves stories of unspoken truths and shocking revelations. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories like this, where justice after years finally has a voice. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I release another video that dives deep into real-life mysteries. Sofia had questions. She felt them every day. The small, nagging doubts that rattled around in the back of her mind like an unanswered riddle. Why didn't she look like anyone around her? Why were there no records of her early years? No baby pictures, no family albums, no traces of a past that should have existed but didn't. It was like she had appeared from thin air, a child with no history. She could ask her mother, Rosa, the woman who had raised her. But every time she did, the answers were vague, always changing, always slipping away like water through her fingers. "We moved a lot," Rosa would say. "You were born in Mexico." But it wasn't true. Sofia wasn't born in Mexico. She was born in the United States, stolen before she could even speak, before she could walk. The truth was buried, hidden beneath layers of lies. Yet Sofia carried on. She went to school, made friends, became a part of the world she knew, trying to fit in, trying to be someone she could recognize. But something was always off. There was always a disconnect between Sofia and the life she was living. It was like she was living someone else's rhythm, always slightly out of sync with the world around her. She didn't quite belong. She didn't know where she came from, who she was. She started asking herself questions she couldn't ignore. Why didn't I look like anyone else? Why don't I have memories of my earliest years? And when she looked at the people around her, her friends, her neighbors, her mother, there was always something missing. She'd often catch herself staring at her reflection in the mirror, studying the unfamiliar face that stared back at her. She'd trace the lines of her face, her eyes, her hair. Nothing about her seemed to match. Where did I come from? Who am I really? But the answers, always slipping away, remained just out of reach. Yet she kept living her life. She fell in love. She started working. She kept moving forward, despite the questions that plagued her. She never stopped asking. But for the time being, the world around her stayed the same. What she didn't know was that far away in a small apartment in Connecticut, her father, Carlos Rivas, had been waiting. After 25 years of silence, Carlos wasn't about to let go of the hope he'd clung to all this time. His daughter, Sofia, was out there somewhere. He had never stopped believing. Carlos had submitted his DNA to a genealogy database. It wasn't much, just a small part of him, hoping against hope that something, somewhere, could reconnect him to his daughter. It was 2024, and the answers, his daughter's answers, were about to come rushing back. The past, so long buried, was about to resurface. It wasn't going to start with a phone call, a tip, or a breakthrough from an investigator. It was going to start with saliva. Saliva, the DNA Carlos had submitted, was about to create the connection that had been missing for so long. The database had started doing something new, something groundbreaking, a program designed to reopen cold cases, like the one Carlos had lived with for 25 years. They used forensic genealogy to connect people, reconnect families, and solve mysteries that had gone cold. Carlos didn't know it yet, but the code inside his blood was about to scream the truth louder than words ever could. And the moment that truth was unleashed, everything would change. Carlos's search had been long and painful. He'd spent years searching, investigating, chasing leads across borders. His heart had never given up. But now, after all this time, he was about to get a lead. He wouldn't have to search anymore, because someone else, someone completely unaware, had unknowingly opened the door to the truth. Sofia, in Puebla, Mexico, Sofia had lived her life, unaware. A life built on a lie. Her birth certificate was gone. Her name was gone. Her family was gone. But for the first time in 25 years, the cracks in Sofia's world were starting to form, and she had no idea. No idea that the truth, the life she should have had, was finally beginning to come to light. But it wasn't just a small piece of a puzzle. It was a bombshell waiting to go off. A woman in her mid-20s had submitted her DNA for ancestry research. She was curious about her heritage, about who she was. What she didn't know was that by submitting her DNA, she was unknowingly connecting herself to a mystery that had been unsolved for years. And it wouldn't be long before the authorities would make the connection. The match. The match. Carlos's DNA, which had been sitting in the database for so long, was finally going to find a match. And that match would be the key to unlocking a world of secrets. But not just secrets about Sofia's identity. It was a world of questions, of stolen memories, of lost time. The moment that match was confirmed, everything that Sofia had known, everything that Rosa had shielded her from, would come crashing down. She had been living in the shadows of a past that wasn't hers. The truth was coming, and it was going to destroy everything Sofia thought she knew about her life. Carlos's heartbreak, his search, his endless hope, was about to give way to something even more painful. The woman who had raised Sofia, who had kept her hidden, was going to have to answer for everything. And so would Sofia. She was going to have to face the truth, face the woman who stole her away. The countdown had begun. Would Sofia ever find peace with the truth, or would the weight of it crush her? The moment that truth came rushing back, it wouldn't be the end. It would be the beginning of something much more complicated. The suspense was unbearable, and the revelation that was about to come was one that no one could have predicted, not even Sofia. What would it feel like to realize that everything you knew, everything you believed about yourself was a lie? And how do you move forward after discovering that the woman who raised you, the one who gave you love, protection, and everything you knew, was also the one who kidnapped you, who took you away from the world you should have had? Sofia didn't know the answers yet, but she was about to. Detective Keelan Nikov had just joined the Special Victims Unit in New Haven. Young, relentless, determined to make a difference. It wasn't long before the weight of the cold cases in the department began to settle into her bones. She was drawn to them, cases that had been buried under years of dust and forgotten whispers. Missing children, abductions, lost lives. Lives that had slipped through the cracks of time, their stories lingering on only in the minds of those who had loved them. One case in particular haunted her, Sofia Michelle Rivas, missing since 1999. A case that had been abandoned by boarders, a child stolen by her own mother, Rosa Tenorio, who had vanished with her daughter, crossing into Mexico, leaving nothing but confusion, pain, and unanswered questions behind. For over 25 years, no one had heard anything. The case had gone cold, the files gathering dust. But Keelan couldn't shake the feeling that something about this case, this child, had been overlooked. She dove deeper into the investigation, reading through the case file, pulling at the threads of a mystery that had been left to fade. Every page, every report, every lead, no arrest, no trace. The name Sofia Michelle Rivas kept popping up in her mind. It wouldn't leave her alone. As she read, Keelan became obsessed. She couldn't let go. There was a father, Carlos Rivas, who had never stopped searching. A man whose life had been shattered by the disappearance of his daughter. The pain in his words, the years of grief that had hardened his heart, spoke volumes. Carlos had spent every day of those 25 years searching. He'd printed flyers, contacted investigators, traveled to Mexico at great personal expense, chasing shadows. His daughter, Sofia, was out there somewhere. And now, Keelan had a small piece of the puzzle that could change everything. The case file she was working through contained something crucial, something that no one had noticed before, a DNA sample. It had been submitted years ago by Carlos Rivas, desperate for answers, hoping that one day someone would hear his cries for help. At the time, it hadn't matched anything in the system. But now in 2024, things had changed. Technology had advanced. Genetic testing had reached new heights. A breakthrough in forensic genealogy had created a new possibility. There was a private genetics company, Aram, that had launched a new initiative, Project 525. Its sole mission was to reopen hundreds of unsolved child abduction cases by using forensic genealogy. The company had been analyzing DNA samples, hoping to connect lost children to their families through family trees. Keelan couldn't believe it. This was her chance. Without hesitation, she submitted Carlos's DNA sample. No expectations, no promises, just hope. Weeks passed, and then the alert came through. A potential match. Puebla, Mexico. A woman in her mid-20s had submitted her DNA for ancestry research. She was curious about her heritage, about her family history. She had no idea that she was about to unknowingly connect the missing pieces of her past. Keelan worked fast. She dove into the woman's online profiles, searched for any possible connection to the Rivas family, anything that might give her more information. She traced her social media accounts, found old photos, gathered documents. She didn't waste time. Keelan compiled everything she found and sent it directly to Carlos. She had no idea what his reaction would be, but when he saw the files, he broke down. He knew. There was no question. "That's her," he whispered through tears. "That's my daughter." But DNA doesn't care about belief. It only tells the truth. Aram, the genetics company, ran the comparison again, this time with their full resources behind it. 99.9999% match. It was an irrefutable bond. The code of DNA had spoken, and Sofia Michelle Rivas had been found. But it wasn't over. There was still so much left to uncover. The hardest part was yet to come. Sofia, now living in Mexico, had no idea. She was living her life, working, dating, paying bills, completely unaware that the foundation of her identity was about to collapse. The woman who had raised her, the woman she called Mama, had stolen her. Her real father, Carlos, was a stranger to her, but that was about to change. Keelan had been preparing for this moment for months. The breakthrough had been a long time coming, but now she had to approach Sofia carefully. The news, when delivered, was going to be a shock, an emotional bombshell that would upend Sofia's world. Detectives arranged for quiet outreach. They carefully explained the case to Sofia, the DNA, the father she never knew existed. But Sofia didn't believe it at first. "My whole life is a lie," she asked. "How is that even possible?" She had been living in the shadows for so long. How could this be true? They showed her the evidence, the documents, the photos, the court order from 1999, the missing posters with her baby face, the birthday flyers her father had printed every year. Sofia sat in stunned silence. Then she whispered, "I remember none of this." The truth had finally caught up with her, but Sofia wasn't ready to accept it just yet. She agreed to a second DNA test. This time it would be supervised, with the full weight of the authorities behind it. The results came back. Confirmed. Again. Sofia Michelle Rivas was indeed the child who had vanished 25 years ago. But DNA can only solve one part of the mystery. The rest, the emotional wreckage, the trauma, the overwhelming weight of betrayal, was going to take time. And time wasn't going to be easy. What happens when you discover that the life you've lived, the name you've carried, the family you thought you knew, was a lie? What happens when the woman who raised you, who gave you everything, was also the one who stole you? Sofia was facing that very question. Her world had just collapsed, and now she had to rebuild it. But where do you even begin? Where do you go when everything you believed to be true was turned upside down? Sofia was about to find out, but she was still far from understanding what came next. And as the story unfolded, the questions only grew. What happens when the truth is revealed? Can Sofia find peace with the knowledge of who she truly is? Can she forgive the woman who raised her for all those years? The suspense was thick, and the resolution still a long way off. The silence was unbearable. Sofia, now a grown woman, stood in front of the detectives, trying to process what they had just told her. Her entire life, every memory she had, everything she had known to be true, shattered in an instant. They spoke calmly, slowly, repeating the details she didn't want to hear. The case, the DNA, the father she never knew. They showed her the papers, court orders, missing posters, photos of her as a child, her face frozen in time, smiling, innocent, unaware of the nightmare waiting in her future. At first, Sofia couldn't fathom it. "My whole life is a lie," she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "How is that even possible? How could it be? After all these years, all the questions, all the pieces that never quite fit, how could everything she believed in be untrue?" She stared at the photographs, her baby face staring back at her from the missing person flyer. The flyer Carlos Rivas, her real father, had printed every year, clinging to the hope that one day, his daughter would return to him. He never stopped searching. They showed her the birth certificate, the court order from 1999, everything that connected her to the truth. But still, she couldn't bring herself to believe it. She sat there motionless, staring at the documents, her world spinning around her. Her memories, her history, everything she had known, now a lie. The room seemed to close in on her. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. Then, in a whisper, barely audible, as though speaking it aloud might make it more real, Sofia said, "I remember none of this." The words hung heavy in the air. She could feel the weight of her past crashing down on her, but it wasn't the weight of her stolen childhood. It was the weight of the unknown. Who was she really? Her life had just unraveled, and yet it wasn't over. The detectives, understanding the depth of the situation, didn't press her. They simply left her with the truth, but the truth was a double-edged sword. Sofia agreed, reluctantly, to take another DNA test. This time, it would be supervised. No more doubts. No more unanswered questions. And when the results came back, confirmed, a 99% match, she was Sofia Michelle Rivas, the child who had disappeared 25 years ago. But the question lingered. What did this revelation mean? Yes, the DNA had solved one part of the puzzle, the scientific part, the biological link between a father and a daughter who had been torn apart. But what about the emotional wreckage? The years of lost love? The pain of a child who had been stolen from her father and raised by a woman who had never let her know the truth? The emotional journey was far from over. Sofia stood at the edge of something monumental. Something no one, no child, no parent, should ever have to go through. She had spent her entire life believing she was someone else. She had spent decades not knowing who she really was. And now, she had to face a future with strangers. Strangers who shared her blood, but nothing else. Sofia felt the weight of that truth sink into her chest. The life she had built, the people she had trusted, all of it now in question. She was shaken, confused, angry. Her emotions swirled like a storm inside of her. Her mind raced as she thought about the woman who had raised her, Rosa Tenorio, the woman who had given her life, but also stolen it away. What would she feel when she saw the truth? What would she feel when she realized that everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie? Sofia wanted answers. She needed them. But she also felt a deep, aching sadness. A sadness for the life she could have had, the life that was taken from her, the family she never knew. She wasn't ready to face it all, not yet, but the reality of the situation pressed down on her. She couldn't escape it. And then came the hardest question of all, one she had to ask herself. How could she forgive Rosa, the woman who had taken her, the woman who had raised her with love, but also with lies? The woman who had robbed her of her true identity. Could she forgive her? Could she ever understand why Rosa did what she did? The silence was deafening as Sofia sat in the room, staring at the photos, the papers, the evidence of the life she never knew. She could feel the pieces of her past slipping through her fingers. But one thing was clear. The truth had been revealed. But in a way, it had only just begun. And the path ahead was full of questions, full of pain, full of things Sofia wasn't sure she was ready to face. The next chapter in her life wasn't about answers. It was about healing. But before healing could begin, Sofia needed to face one more thing, the hardest thing, her mother. And when she did, when that moment came, everything would change. Would Sofia be able to forgive Rosa? Would she ever understand the truth of what happened? Only time would tell. But the journey was far from over. And just like that, the story of Sofia Michelle Rivas took another unexpected turn. The suspense? It was thick, lingering in the air, waiting to explode. Sofia, now 27 years old, stood frozen, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The weight of everything crashing down on her felt unbearable, almost suffocating. She didn't recognize herself, not in the way she once did. Her identity, everything she thought she knew about herself, was unraveling before her eyes. The woman who had raised her, loved her, guided her through life, was the same woman who had stolen her away. Rosa Tenorio, the woman who taught her how to ride a bike, how to read, how to speak, was the woman who had ripped her from her real father's arms and turned her life into a lie. The woman who had raised her, her mother, was the one who had taken her away from the life she was supposed to have. Her real father, a stranger, Carlos Rivas, a man she had never known, never recognized, a man who had spent 25 years searching for her, a man who had cried for her every year, printing missing flyers, hoping, praying that one day he would find her. But now, she was staring at a face in the mirror, her face, but it wasn't the one she thought she knew. Her whole life, every memory, every piece of who she thought she was being ripped apart. The lies, the half-truths. They all came crashing in like a storm. What happened when you find out you've lived your entire life as someone else? What happens when you realize everything, the name, the birthday, the family, you've ever known is nothing but a construct, a false identity? Sofia's mind was racing. Her world was spinning. She couldn't even look at herself the same way anymore. Her reflection felt like a stranger's. She wasn't even Sofia Michelle Rivas. That name, her name, was stolen. A name she had worn for 27 years was now nothing but a label on a stranger's life. All those moments she thought were hers, the laughter, the childhood memories, the milestones, now felt foreign, as though they didn't belong to her at all. The grief, the confusion, it was overwhelming. And yet the hardest part of all was this. How could this have happened? How could Rosa, the woman she called Mom, do this to her? How could she have lived this life for so long without even knowing the truth? The truth, hidden beneath layers of lies, was finally revealed. And yet, it only left more questions in its wake. Why did Rosa do this? What was her reasoning? Sofia had been living a life full of love, but also full of secrets. Secrets that now threatened to crush her. She asked herself again, why did she do it? Why take me away from my real father? The questions echoed in her mind as she tried to piece everything together. The pain in her chest, the overwhelming sorrow for the life that had been stolen, was almost too much to bear. She wanted answers. She needed them, But how could she get them? She had to confront Rosa. She had to confront the woman who had taken her and given her a life that was never truly hers. Sofia needed to know why. She needed to hear it from Rosa herself. But when that moment came, when the confrontation happened, Sofia knew she wouldn't be ready. How could she be? How do you face the person who raised you, only to find out they were the one who robbed you of everything you should have had? Could she forgive Rosa? Could she ever understand her mother's actions? The weight of the betrayal of the lost years was too much. Sofia wanted to scream, to break down, to cry for the lost moments, the lost years. But instead, all she could do was sit in the silence of her own thoughts. The pain of the truth was sharp, cutting through the layers of her life. And still, Sofia couldn't bring herself to face the woman who had taken her away. Rosa had hidden the truth from her for so long, and now Sofia was left to try to make sense of it all. Who was she? What was real? What kind of world was this, where love and betrayal were so deeply entwined? Sofia's journey had just begun, and yet it felt like it was ending all at once. Her life was fractured, her identity a shattered mirror. Could she ever feel whole again? And as the emotional storm raged inside her, one thing was certain: the path ahead was uncertain, painful, and full of unanswered questions. But the one thing Sofia knew, no matter how much time it took, no matter how long it took for her to find herself again, she had to face Rosa. She had to face the woman who had both loved her and destroyed her. And that was the hardest part: the confrontation, the truth, the wreckage of it all. But there was more. There was a deeper layer to this story, a story of survival, a story of love, a story of finding your way when everything around you has crumbled. And just when Sofia thought she had everything figured out, the next twist in this harrowing journey would arrive, one she never saw coming. She wasn't ready, she wasn't prepared, but the truth was waiting. And soon everything she had ever known would be tested. Who could she trust? What was her next move? The suspense hung in the air, thick and suffocating. What would Sofia do next? Sofia's mind was racing. Her entire identity was shattered. The weight of everything she'd thought she knew about herself, the life she'd lived, the memories she'd created, was crumbling before her eyes. Who am I really? That question burned in her mind as she sat there, staring at the reflection in the mirror, but the face staring back at her felt like a stranger's. Her life, her name, Sofia Michelle Rivas, wasn't even hers. She was stolen as a toddler and raised under a false identity, a lie that Rosa had carefully crafted to protect her. Or so she thought. The betrayal hurt more than she could express. How could she do this to me? Sofia had spent 27 years building a life that was real to her, filled with love, memories, and the woman she believed to be her mother. But now that everything had come to light, the love she felt for Rosa was tainted. Rosa was the person who had taken her away from her real father, Carlos Rivas, the person who had erased her history, her childhood, and built a life based on lies. The quiet little girl she had been, living a seemingly ordinary life in Puebla, Mexico. None of it had been real. The people she called family, the school she went to, the home she grew up in, it was all a construct, an elaborate story Rosa had created to shield Sofia from her true past. Sofia had grown up in a cage, never knowing that the world outside was so different. Never knowing that the people she trusted most, the woman who raised her, was the very reason she was lost in the first place. There was so much she wanted to say, so much anger, so much pain. But all Sofia could do was sit in the silence of her own thoughts. Why did you take me? There was no simple answer to that question. How could Rosa explain such a monumental betrayal? How could she even face me now? Sofia didn't know what to expect when she finally confronted her. What would Rosa say? Would she beg for forgiveness? Would she try to explain herself? Or would she simply break down and admit the truth? Sofia couldn't answer that question yet. She wasn't ready for the confrontation, but the fact that it was coming, looming over her like an unstoppable force, was undeniable. Every conversation she'd had with Rosa over the years, every story, every excuse, had now been uncovered as a lie. It wasn't just that Rosa had kidnapped her. No, it was the fact that she had erased Sofia's entire identity. She had tried to replace her history with something that never existed. That wasn't just a betrayal of Sofia, it was a betrayal of her very essence. Sofia's mind kept spinning, lost in the waves of this overwhelming reality. But she knew that despite the anger she felt, despite the resentment that burned deep within her, she had to face Rosa. Not because she wanted closure, not because she expected an apology, but because she needed answers. She needed to understand. The emotional toll was heavy. So much had been stolen from her. The life she could have had, the relationship she should have had with her real father, Carlos, and the years she lost to a woman who couldn't be trusted. But even with all that hurt, Sofia knew she couldn't keep running from the truth. It was time to face it head on. What did I lose? That question echoed in her mind as she reflected on the years that had slipped away. She had lost her childhood. She had lost time with her father. She had lost the opportunity to grow up knowing the people who were supposed to love her family, her real family, had been waiting for her. And the hardest part? She couldn't go back. She couldn't rewind time. The years were gone, and no matter how much she longed to recapture them, they were forever out of her reach. But one thing Sofia knew for sure. She wasn't going to let this break her. The truth was raw. It had shattered her life. It had taken everything Sofia once thought she knew and turned it on its head. But as the days passed, she began to heal. After hearing the results of the DNA tests, after confronting the truth about her past, Sofia felt an overwhelming surge of emotions. How do you process this much pain? She was still in disbelief, still in shock. But a part of her knew that the journey she had been on wasn't just about finding her real identity. It was about healing. Healing from the loss. Healing from the trauma. Healing from a life that had been stolen from her. And that process, those first steps toward healing, started with one decision. She had to meet her father. Sofia made the decision to meet Carlos Rivas, a man who had spent half his life searching for her, a man who had never stopped believing that she was out there, a man who had cried for her, printed missing flyers year after year, and never gave up hope. It wasn't going to be easy. She didn't know what to expect. She didn't know how to prepare herself for the meeting. How could she? She had lived her entire life without him. And now, here he was, the man she had never known, the man whose blood ran through her veins. Sofia boarded a plane to Connecticut, to the place where it all began, the place where she had been stolen from, the place where the truth had been hidden from her for so long. Carlos had promised to be there at the airport to greet her when she arrived. When Sofia stepped off the plane and saw him standing there, his eyes full of tears, his face weathered with age but full of love, the world felt a little more real again. For the first time in her life, Sofia felt like she was coming home. She could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of everything she had been through, finally beginning to lift. But there was still a long road ahead. The road to forgiveness, to understanding, to healing. Carlos stood there, shaking with emotion. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, but he didn't know how he would feel. When he saw her, his daughter, the daughter he had been separated from for so many years, he couldn't contain his tears. "She looks like a dream I tried to forget," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Sofia hugged him tightly, holding on to him like she had never held anyone before. The years of separation, the years of pain, the years of unanswered questions, all melted away in that embrace. But even as they held each other, they both knew this wasn't the end. The emotional pain wasn't gone. The years lost couldn't be recovered. But in this moment, there was hope. There was a chance for a future together. Sofia would need time to come to terms with the loss of her childhood, but she had found something that was even more precious. She had found her father. They didn't know where the future would lead, but for the first time in 27 years, Sofia had a sense of peace. And as they stood together, holding on to each other, Sofia whispered something she never thought she would say. "It's good to finally come home." But the road to forgiveness would take time. It wasn't an overnight process. The wounds ran deep. There were so many unanswered questions. And as Sofia's journey continued, she knew the hardest part was still ahead of her. She had to face the woman who raised her, the woman who had taken her from the life she should have had, the woman who had erased her identity. But before she did that, before she faced Rosa Tenorio, she knew one thing for sure. Sofia Michelle Rivas was finally coming home. After the years of waiting, the unanswered questions, and the years of being trapped in the dark, Sofia now stood at the door that would open to everything she had longed for, the truth. Her hands shook as she took a deep breath. She had seen her biological father, Carlos, for the first time in more than 2 decades. Their conversation was full of tears, pain, and uncertainty, but they were slowly moving towards healing. But the real storm, the one that had been swirling in the back of Sofia's mind, was about to hit. The woman who had raised her, the woman who she had called Mama for all these years, was the same woman who had stolen her life. Rosa Tenorio, her mother, the woman she had always trusted, loved, and thought of as her protector, was the one who had taken her from her real family and forced her into a life of lies. They had arranged a meeting, a small, quiet conversation between Sofia and Rosa. It was all set to happen under the calm pretense of normalcy, but there was nothing normal about it. Rosa was waiting for her, and as Sofia stood outside the door, ready to walk in, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment crashing down on her. This was the woman who had lied to her, the one who had hurt her by stealing her identity. The door opened. Rosa looked at Sofia, and for a moment there was no recognition. It was as if time had frozen. She hadn't seen this woman in years, but she knew her immediately. She knew those eyes, those features, the subtle softness of her expression. But it wasn't a soft look. It wasn't a look of a mother's warmth. It was the look of someone who had been running from the truth for far too long. Sofia stood there, taking in the woman who had been her mother. And in that moment, she felt everything. She felt the love she had for Rosa, but mixed with an undercurrent of betrayal that ran so deep, she felt as though it might swallow her whole. She had to ask the question that had been boiling inside her since the moment she learned the truth. Why? Sofia's voice cracked. Why did you take me? Why did you do this to me? Rosa's face went pale. For a second, she didn't say anything. She looked at Sofia as if she were processing the gravity of her words. Then her lips parted, and it was as if the floodgates opened, but not with the honesty Sofia was expecting. I was scared, Rosa whispered. I thought they'd take you from me forever. I didn't trust the courts. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was protecting you. Protecting her? Sofia could feel the anger rise in her chest. The rage that had been bubbling beneath the surface now threatened to break free. How could she claim to protect her when all she had done was steal her life? You protected me? Sofia repeated, her voice low and incredulous. You protected me by keeping me from my real father? By keeping me from everything I deserved to know? My identity, my whole life, was a lie. How is that protecting me? Rosa's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time since Sofia had walked through that door, Rosa looked vulnerable. She seemed smaller, fragile, but it didn't change the fact that she had stolen everything from Sofia, her real family, her name, her past. I loved you, Rosa said, voice breaking. I always loved you. You were my daughter. I wanted to raise you. I never wanted to hurt you. But it was too late. Sofia felt like she was suffocating. Her whole life had been built on a lie. Her mother, the woman she had trusted, had taken her from everything she knew and loved. The pain of it all threatened to overwhelm her, but she held it in. She didn't want Rosa to see her break. She wasn't sure if she would ever be able to forgive her, but she knew one thing for sure. Forgiveness would come, but not today. You made my life a lie, Sofia whispered, the weight of those words settling into the room like a stone. Sofia's heart was heavy with the anger and confusion. How do you forgive someone who stole everything from you? How could Rosa, her mother, have believed that what she was doing was for the best? Sofia's mind raced with unanswered questions, but in the end, the truth was simple. She had been taken. Her life had been stolen from her, and the woman sitting across from her, the woman who loved her so deeply, had been the one who caused that. The silence between them was thick. There was no anger in Sofia now. It was all raw grief, all the pieces of a shattered past crashing down at once. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She couldn't. She just sat there and waited. "I didn't want to hurt you," Rosa whispered again, but the pain was already done, and Sofia knew that. She had to reconcile the mother she had known, the one who loved her, who cared for her, with the truth of who Rosa really was. The woman who had taken her from everything and everyone she had ever known. It was a long moment before either of them spoke. Then finally Sofia broke the silence. "You can love someone and still destroy them." Rosa sat there, her face pale, her heart breaking under the weight of those words. She said nothing. There would be no arrests, no courtroom justice for Rosa Tenorio. The warrant for her crime was real, but it was enforceable only in the United States. But Sofia didn't want revenge. She didn't want Rosa to be in prison. She wanted truth. She wanted space. And so Sofia made a choice. She packed a bag, she bought a ticket, and she boarded a plane bound for Connecticut, the home she never knew, the place where she vanished. It was time to reclaim her identity. The flight was long, but Sofia didn't feel the passage of time. In those hours, she had a chance to reflect on everything she had learned. She was finally leaving the place where everything had been stolen from her, where her life had been fabricated under false pretenses. When she arrived in Connecticut, her biological father, Carlos, was waiting for her at the airport. No cameras, no press, just him, the man who had never stopped searching for her. His face was weathered by years of longing, but his eyes were full of love. Carlos gave her a small key. "This is yours," he said softly. "It opens your room, the one we never changed." Sofia took the key and followed him to the house where she had never been but had always belonged. Inside, there were toys still sealed in boxes, books with her name written inside, a photo album labeled Andrea, her name, years they missed. As Sofia flipped through the album, the reality of it all began to sink in. She saw her name, her real name, etched in photographs. She saw the family she had never known. And for the first time in her life, Sofia realized what it meant to belong. Wow, what an emotional journey this has been. A huge thank you to my amazing subscribers for sticking with this channel and making it grow. Your support means everything. If this story touched your heart and you want to hear more of these incredible stories of survival, hit that like button now. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Join us for more true crime investigations and solve cold cases that'll leave you speechless. Make sure to turn on the notification bell so you're always the first to hear about these powerful stories. And share this video with anyone who still believes in the strength of family and the power of finding the truth. Want to dive into more solved cold cases? Check out our previous videos on this channel. It's full of stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.